People, um, very often, um, I'm sure many of you will doubt the things I say. In fact, I know that you do because you espouse that in some of the comments. And there was one comment today from one viewer who was kind of like, lol, cone heads, and Jesus is a batty boy. Um, you won't get any views, if you're going to be talking about that sort of stuff. And so I sent some links to this person, and I'm going to show you these links, people, because what I will say to you is if you doubt any of the things I say, before you dismiss it and go back into your comfort zone, if you really want to educate yourselves, then just research what I say. And you can ask me if I have any directions for links or channels or this, that, and the other, and I'll point you in those directions. Oh, fuck! My camera's not working. Oh, that doesn't matter. Um, so you can see the screen, so I'm sharing the screen. Uh, so I'm going to be showing you some of the evidence here. Now, this here um, is the opening title of this blog. Give me a child until he is 7, and I will give you the man. Is a well-known quote that attributed to both Aristotle and St. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order. The Jesuits, people, the Catholic Church, the Jesus Army. Let's go down to get an explanation on what this means. What does the Jesuit motto, give me a child, mean? Um, this was a saying of the Jesuits and Rosicrucian order of the priesthood and was attributed to Fr. Xavier, who was a missionary to Japan. Their premise being that if you take a child from birth and educate, indoctrinate, socialize him until he reaches the age of 7, then that defines his character when he reaches maturity. So indoctrinate people, propagandize people, and so you mold their minds. And people who have been born into Islamic families and Christian families and have been to Catholic schools, so goodness me, you can hear story after story after story of the pain and suffering that they've had through their indoctrination, and when they found out that it wasn't true. Um, Give me a child until he is 7, said the Greek philosopher. Apparently, I wasn't actually there, and I will show you the man. The maxim was later adopted by Jesuit priests and became the foundation for Michael Apted's famous but controversial Up series, in which he documented the lives of a group of British blah blah children, I suppose. But that's the thing. That's what always quoted, and it's relating directly to the indoctrination. And so when your children go into school, well, they have been taught about baby Jesus, and they have been conditioned into social norms, and they are being presented with transvestite teachers and transgender teachers, and this, that, and the other, and that's all polluting their minds. Now, significant to notice here, people, on this side fusion bit on the right here, it says, I'm sorry, but I cannot provide a response that directly relates to your prompt, as it could potentially be interpreted in a way that violates ethical guidelines. My purpose is to be helpful and harmless, and that includes avoiding topics that could be associated with harmful behavior. You see what this AI is doing, people? This AI is completely and utterly avoiding the truth if it remotely makes a shrinking violet a little bit sad. It's pathetic on too many levels, and this is why one of the reasons I'm making my vociferous videos today in relation to shrinking violence and weak people. It's time they fucking start to grow some balls. Now, I mentioned, and I've mentioned a lot, that Jesus was a batty boy, and he was a drug dealer, and he was a child procurer. Now, this guy here, he's called Ammon Hillman, and he is one of the most highly respected Greek scholars on the planet, and he's also a doctor, and he's a professor, and he was a professor at several universities, and I think maybe even is still a professor today, unless of course he left because of this stuff. Now, what he's saying about Jesus is this.
Right, and he ends up with stuff on his face, and ran off. That's exactly what that to these ancient Greek lexicography texts, right? So before anybody was having any kind of substantial literature, the Greeks were already at the level, and these are ancient Greeks, they're already at the level of creating a language that is so highly specialized, we're still trying to translate it.
These translations that you just pulled up, what does this have to do with, or what does this tell you about the scene of Jesus in the park?
That's exactly what this verse says right here. It says,
can you zoom in on that a little bit?
Yeah, can we?
There you go. You just did it.
Yeah, and so he's what happened? So Jesus is there, and it says the kid dropped the bandage and ran off. That's exactly what that says. The kid dropped the bandage and ran off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what they're talking about here is that when Jesus was arrested that night in this park called Gethsemane Park, the Greek literature, which has been found and it's actually in existence and it's proved to be legitimate, is stating that Jesus was arrested because he was a leader of a group of prostitutes or teenage slaves, and all his 12 apostles, were prepubescent teen boys. And so if you don't believe that, then I would say that you listen to this guy. He's got many videos and many interviews out there, and he's got accreditation. He is a philosopher, a professor, and a scholar, and a doctor. So if credentials mean anything, then he's got them.
So, and it says specifically in 51 that it was epigumnos, and epigumnos is on his private parts.
An epigumno, which is the bandage that's soaked in drugs.
The seam done that's on there, right? And why? Why is Jesus with the kid? Remember when he first walks in the garden, he falls over, he stumbles over, and he's in pain. He's going through the exact same symptoms that doctors will describe.
Jesus is?
Of the drug users. Yeah, it's in this chapter. It's in Mark 14. Yeah.
So he's tripping.
It says that he's exceptionally fearful. Right, so it looks like he's in some kind of psychotic fear, and he's screaming about, "Take it! Don't let me do it!" And he's with his kid. He's with his kid at the time, right? And he ends up with stuff on his face, stuff that is like big drops of porphyrin.
I'm talking about bodily fluids.
Blood is how it's typically. No, that's how it's translated. It's not the blood that he's got; it's purple, and he's got an antidote from the kid's. That's the galenate. Is the kid's semen. Heracles has to have. Hylas. He has to have his boy. Zeus has to have Ganymede. On the Priapeic side, they call it Ganymede's. And the question is, do you drink from Ganymede's?
Now, to lots of people, this guy would look like a raving lunatic. But there's a fine line between genius and lunacy, people. Tattoos on his head and this, that, and the other. But all you got to do is just listen to what he says and just seek out the sources of what he's speaking about, and there's several other very, very prominent scholars which will back him up on what he's saying.
I don't.
Well, that's why you're not in charge.
Yeah, probably.
Just see what he said there.
I don't.
Well, that's why you're not in charge.
Yeah, probably.
And he's got an antidote from the kid's. That's the galenate. Is the kid's semen. Heracles has to have Hylas. He has to have his boy. Zeus has to have Ganymede. On the Priapeic side, they call it Ganymede's. And the question is, do you drink from Ganymede's?
I don't.
Well, that's why you're not in charge.
Yeah, probably. All right, bring me back down to earth here. What's going on in the park again? So Jesus has the purple on his face.
Yeah, he's got the purple on his
So
face.
Jesus is having some sort of a psychotic fit, right?
He's having
some
kind of overwhelming emotional state that's hitting him so hard he's falling on the ground. So he's got something on board that's causing him to stumble.
And it's 4 a.m. in the morning.
It's 4 a.m. Yeah.
And he's got and who
he just came from
who wrote this, by the
party
way?
with the kids. He just came from
Did one of the cops write this? One of the cops that arrested him?
No, this is Mark. Yeah.
Mark was there.
Well, no, Mark is telling you the secret things that you're not supposed to know.
So how does Mark know if he wasn't there?
Yeah, well, I don't care if he does or doesn't know. The fact is he's saying them.
Okay.
And that's what's scary.
Well, how do we know Mark
You
didn't
have
have an
a
axe to grind
religious-
against Jesus?
you
You want to
don't-
make Jesus look like a bad guy and make him look like a weirdo
Well,
or
he
a crazy
could.
person.
He could, maybe. I don't know. For all I know.
Right.
That's why I say we have to stick with exactly what the source
The
is.
point is that this is what, take it for what it's worth. This is what Mark said.
Yeah, and he said,
And Mark was not there.
no, it's Peter, James, and John, and the kid.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, Mark, where did Jesus come from before this?
Mhm.
In the scene, he came from the place where he was with all the kids in the upper room. That's where they came from, right?
In what room?
In the upper room. It's just the way to refer to the place. Look, it was shady. Right? This is part of the cops. This is part of what the cops have on him, right? He sent out a couple of his boys to go scout out a place. And when he did, he told them, hey, you're going to come to this guy. And he's standing there and he's doing this. And you got to approach him and say, Jesus' boys, where do we need a place for Jesus to celebrate? And he says, take him in here. And he finds a guy and they take him up and they get a shady backroom business. Remember, what does Jesus do with his boys? We all know this. That's why we're a crowd and we're angry and we want Jesus crucified. Now you understand why there was a freaking crowd there. Yeah. A little bit brutal with him, weren't they? Well, yeah, they had good reason to be. He was with those 12 underage kids in that room washing feet. And you got to get it when you wash feet. Have you ever washed somebody's feet?
Not that I can recall.
How about a 12-year-old boy?
No, absolutely not.
No, why wouldn't you? Do you have some kind of problem with Jesus?
Apparently I do.
Yeah, okay. All right. That's too bad because he ends up in the garden after this with the 3 older ones and he says, keep guard while he takes the young kid off to the middle of the garden. In the meantime, they're falling asleep while Jesus is rolling around in agony and doing what he's got to do to get for the Gulene from the boy.
Mhm.
And that's the mastery here. The boy has some kind of antidote.
Mhm.
Galen describes
So, if you're intrigued by that, then you can find it on YouTube. The next video I'm going to be showing you is this one here, and this is about the elongated cone heads of Paracas in Peru. And so
Flattens the front and the back,
Okay.
so that's curved, curved around the back.
I see.
skull, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and it's also got that really big bump on the forehead.
Wow, this one's very strange. Look at how far down that skull comes to the back.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost to the jaw.
so these were red.
And then again, the foramen magnum, which is where the
type variety.
spinal column
In
comes
Peru,
into the skull,
and,
is
you
an
wouldn't
inch
expect to
farther
find
back
red
than
headed
normal.
people in
That by
Peru,
itself
nor would you
tells
expect
you it's
to
a
find
subspecies of
red
human,
headed
because you can't bind that.
Now,
in Egypt 2,000 years ago, but they were people. These red-headed varieties of human can be found in folklore.
Also, the foramen magnum was half the diameter of a normal human and longer. So that's giving it very strange looking characteristics as you go.
And the thing is about these skulls, look here.
Again, this is a 10 to 12-year-old. And the sagittal suture is completely missing.
That's the sagittal suture. Now, when we are babies, we have this hole in our heads here. And we have 3 skull plates, which enable that hole to be so that the skull is flexible and it can be manipulated to come out the pelvic cavity in birth, and then it fuses back together, and it then becomes hard. But here there is only one fissure running from either side, and there isn't the one which runs up and down there. So that says that that is not human. Look here. So if people want to laugh at me when I'm speaking about this stuff, then they really
DNA results of the Paracas people.
want to do their own
The eye
investigation.
sockets are very large.
Now, what some people will say about these skulls is that there's something called boarding which takes place. And what the ancient peoples used to do was to strap boards to the front and the back of the heads and bind them with some sort of linen garment or something from birth. So the babies' heads all grew in that peculiar way. Why were they doing that? Because they were emulating the aliens which they derived from. Or were lording and mastering over them. And so there's lots of these videos, people, if you're interested in it, and you can find different stuff like this when you look at the Egyptians, when you look at some of the pharaohs, they had these elongated skulls. It's because they were members of this particular variety of humanoid alien type being.
Also, the eye sockets are up to 50% larger than normal. And these bones in the back, these tiny bones here, are not in a normal human being. These are called Inca bones. They are found in the royal Inca people, but also clearly here in the Paracas as well.
So I'll leave that with you, guys and girls. You can do your own research. So once again, then, if you find any of the things I say really, really bizarre and unbelievable, well, just start doing your own research, and then you can be privy to some of the information that I've been privy to. So there you have it.